Hi, welcome to the very first episode of the Curiosity Exchange. I am your host Sudhi. Through this series, we will explore creativity, technology, philosophy, and human potential beyond the buzzwords, so we can ask the deeper questions that matters for our future. Today, I am honored to have Professor Dr. Josse Roussel with me. He is a respected voice in human capital, finance, and higher education from the Paris School of Business. Together, we will explore a question that's reshaping industries, career, and even our sense of purpose. What does AI really mean for human capital? This isn't the usual debate of will AI take our jobs. We will go beyond the headlines into the overlooked critical dimensions of the human capital in the age of AI. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you so much for the having me on, and it's a pleasure to be on this podcast with you.
We would like to know more about you, your academic journey, and why the topic human capital excites you.
So as I said, I'm Dr. Roussel. I'm pretty much in higher education and also expert, as you said, in human capital. Uh, I also have some responsibilities in ESGCI School of Management as well as Paris School of Business. And I'm really interested in having this conversation on the interplay between AI and human capital, because there are a lot of things that people are fearing regarding the impact of AI on human capital, but there are also some great opportunities that we have to talk about. When for example, I started into the academic world and professional world, because I got my PhD in 1996 from University of Paris Dauphine, PSL. Now it's called PSL University, and which is obviously Paris Dauphine is based in France, and that was maybe the first. I mean, the at that time you could see the digital revolution at play. It was in the early stages of that digital revolution. The internet was really spreading very fast, was becoming used more and more by academics, by professionals, by companies, but it was still in its infancy. You didn't have this ecosystem of apps and the tools that we're using today, for example, for this podcast. And therefore, as a young professional and higher education professional and consultant as well, so I saw over the last 3 decades the transformation of the way we interact with businesses, the way we interact with students, because of those, or thanks to those new technologies. So if you move, for example, from 1996, when I had my PhD, say 10 years later, 2006, so you already had a different world, because not only the emails was massively used, but you also had blogs, you also had websites, which were now prevalent. Every company its own website, and using, of course, emails. You had the first social networks starting to come on the scene, and therefore communication was transformed. And I think it really it was I think a watershed moment in a way, because for the first time we had the power of computing uh, things connected with the power of communicating things. So you had computing power merge with communication power. And every format, video, sound, writing, everything, music, everything was going to be channels through the same kind of network. So, and of course, you have the iPhone revolution, the smartphone revolution. I think it was 2007, something like that, or if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the launch was in 2007, and therefore you also have this mobile type of devices. That is, the idea that internet could be with you at home in your office, but wherever you are, provided you have a good network. And that also made the revolution, because mobility became part of the equation as well. So, and therefore, I think that AI is basically some kind of the next stage in this process, which started, uh, if we go back to the 1940s or 50s, with computing power becoming, more and more impressive. And then with the internet revolution, computing power is merged with the ability to communicate data, any kind of data, video, text, whatever it is. And then we have mobility of that, computing power with communication power plus mobility. And now we have this AI, which is promising and to some extent already delivering the ability to reason, the ability to organize, to sort things out, and to therefore offer some forms of intelligence. That's the reason we call that, artificial intelligence, because it's supposed to mimic the human intelligence to some extent, and therefore that's just another stage in this process.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Professor. I'm really excited to dive deeper into your work and the ideas we are about to explore. And that brings us to the discussion segments and questions. So we have divided it into 4 segments. Each segment has 2 questions. So in this conversation, we will explore how AI is reshaping the very idea of human capital, from redefining what makes us valuable to examining the inequalities it could create, the unspoken risks it brings, and finally, how we can prepare for a future where humans and machines evolve together. Human capital has traditionally been measured through skills, education, and productivity. With AI augmenting and replacing many tasks, how should we redefine human capital? Is it time to consider emotional capital, resilience, or even ethical capital as measurable assets?
That's a very good question, because it's true that human capital is grounded on skills, education, learning. So we also have to keep in mind, and I just want to make a quick comment on that, that human capital is also grounded on health, because in order for someone to be productive, to be able to produce something, then you need to be healthy. So I think healthcare, a healthy environment is also critical to the flourishing of human capital, to the development of human capital. And then in order to also be more specific about what do we mean by human capital, we have to understand that it can be understood at 3 different levels. So we can look at human capital for a person, for an individual person. We can look at human capital for, say, a company, for example, because if you're a company, you have people working in the company and they bring their competence, their talents, their energy in the company. And we can also think of human capital at the macro level for a nation, for example, because of course it's a fantastic and challenge to have nations that are investing in their own human capital, because it's going to be for them one of the ways to grow faster and to become more productive as a nation. And that's the reason we call that human capital, because it's something which can grow, because you can invest in a capital and to make it, better, but also it can be, losing value because of some events and some issues that could happen. And therefore, there's if you look back at industrial revolutions, there's always been this issue of competence or skills obsolescence. That you used to be, for example, doing a trade, you were performing a job, you mastered a trade, you had developed great skills at something, and all of a sudden there is a new technology, a new type of machinery that's going to supersede and the skills that you have acquired over time, and do your job basically more efficiently, cheaper, and so on. And this is a phenomenon that's not new, and therefore with AI, obviously we have this idea that it might be in some industries or in some professions a threat, in that some of the skills and competencies that as individuals we have developed could be challenged, could be made obsolete with the rise of AI. So that's the one side of the story. The other side, of course, which is much more, I think, optimistic and much more exciting in a way, is that each and every one of us could benefit from AI because AI is a fantastic tool to learn and to educate yourself in a very convenient way. It's like you can learn about chemistry, you can learn about philosophy, you can learn about management techniques with AI. And the AI that we see, growing, whether it's Gemini, whether it's Grok, whether it's ChatGPT 5 or the others, and of course DeepSeek and so on, those tools are becoming more and more powerful. And they basically work like a huge library, but able to retrieve information at a super fast speed. And therefore, potentially, those AI systems can be amazing tools to learn and therefore to develop your own human capital. You can learn, develop skills, you can upskill with AI tools. So that's the good side of the story. There is we always have two sides to a story, and therefore there is the fear that we see, a lot of people are talking about, and there are some, reasons for that, obviously, because AI can definitely be also, taking over some jobs and making some competencies and skills obsolete. But then AI can also develop your skills, can be a great tool for upskilling people.
In finance, intangible assets drive valuation. Do you think human adaptability and creativity will become the new balance sheet items for nations and organizations?
Yeah, I think you're putting your finger on a very, very important point, which is the rise of non-tangible assets in terms of valuation of companies. It's true that when you look, for example, at the gap between market value and book value, the accounting value is the gap is quite huge, and it's getting bigger as we move forward in time because the non-tangible assets, as you said, are representing the overwhelming bulk of the value of companies today. And especially in some industries like IT, like the pharmaceutical industry, where those non-tangible assets are paramount. You have brands, you have the reputation of a company, you have the people working, the quality of the people working for the company. And therefore, it's true that the AI revolution is going to have an impact because already we see that data and the ability to make sense of data, the ability to collect data, number one, to make sense of data, number two, and to design policies based on that is critical to the value of a company. So data has a value. It's like the new gold of age, and therefore AI is a tool with immense power in order to turn data, which are basically say nuggets of digital gold into real gold and real value. And therefore, as part of the race towards value for companies and profitability, AI is going to become a tool that's going to be quite amazing. So, in order to make sense of data in a more efficient way and to use the sense making, the understanding of the data to develop better pricing policies, to develop better marketing policies, and of course, AI is going to be also instrumental in leading to automation of what has not been automated thus far. Because if you look back in history, there's been this amazing movement toward automation, and this has led to productivity gains. That is to be able to do more with the same what called production factors. So that is, if you take 1 hour of labor, you do more with 1 hour of labor today than what we used to be able to do in the 1900s, for example. And this phenomenon, of course, is likely to move to increase, we're likely to have more productivity gains because AI is going to be able to turbocharge the working hours. That is, 1 hour of labor is because it's going to be complemented by AI, it's going to be much more productive, which means, of course, we'll need less hours of labor. That's the automation. We put more capital, so it would be AI capital in that case, in order to automate and some of the processes that we've not been successful in automating thus far, because automation, historically speaking, has been mostly in the manufacturing world, but now it's spreading to the service industries as well, and AI has a quite significant power to that extent. It's going to be an instrument whereby we're to be able to automate what was not possibly automated in the past, not in the recent past. And therefore, yes, it will have an impact in terms of valuation. And so that's the reason companies are today in a, they're sort of in a rock, between a rock and a hard place in a way, because they know they have to go there. They know they have to invest massively in AI, but they're not always sure how to do it because it's brand new, because it's changing all the time. I mean, it's evolving very quickly, which is the characteristic of AI, is that it's being updated constantly. And so you have to go for it, but you don't know exactly how to do it. And this is creating, this kind of anxiety, this kind of trial and error type of attitude. That is, we have to go there. We know we're going to make mistakes, but we're going for it anyway, and we'll correct along the way. We'll make some adjustments. But all companies are, basically jumping to the same conclusion, that it's not an option. We have to go there, and we'll have to figure out a way to make it as efficient as possible. Because you're right, the valuation of a company, the value, especially in service industries, is going to be more and more driven by those digital, I would say, this digital capital, the data that you have, and the tools, the digital tools, AI being one of them, which is used to make sense of data and to automate processes in a very efficient way.
AI could deepen inequalities between workers who adapt quickly and those who don't. How can companies and governments prevent a new form of digital caste system?
Yeah, because you're correct. I mean, each time you have an industrial revolution, it means that basically things are being turned upside down, and usually in those kind of massive upheaval, big changes, you have winners and losers. And the question is how much winners will win and losers will lose. And therefore, if we go into too much of a gap between the winners and the losers, then we may have, some social issues and cultural problems and political problems as well. And therefore, we've seen that already. Just before AI, if you look at what happened over the last 3 decades, say from the 1990s to nowadays, we had the rise of globalization coupled with digital revolution. So as I said, the internet, computing power, the software industry, which has made amazing progress, communication with devices like Zoom and Google Meet and so on. So that has already led to a big change in the I would say in the world in terms of skills and winners and losers. So we've seen already a concentration in terms of winning and losing. So few people are winning, but winning big, and quite I would say a lot of people have been losing substantial in terms of status, in terms of income and stability. And therefore, there is a legitimate fear that we can have when it comes to AI and the impact it's going to have. because one of the fears, because AI could basically be an instrument that's going to um, turn obsolete some of the skills of white collar jobs, which so far have been protected from obsolescence by the former industrial revolutions. And I think to some extent, of course, this fear is legitimate, because when you look at what AI can potentially do, is to fully automate and to fully replace some of the middle management, or middle range experts who are making decisions and having to perform a job within companies. So that's something where certainly there is this type of risk, and it's certainly going to be spreading in companies. For example, you have some economists trying to make sense of the very disappointing job figures in the United States. For example, in August, in the past month, August, you had only 22,000 job creations, and that was much lower than expected. And some economists are saying that this is already AI being a driver of that, because companies are trying to automate and trying to use AI as much as possible instead of recruiting people to do the job. So they try to use this new technology, or this new family of technologies, to automate what was not automated, or at least not largely automated before. And if we go a bit beyond that, if we take stock and look at the big picture, this issue of concentration of wealth or income is, in a way, is making sense, because if you look at what happened in the internet revolution, which started in the 1990s. At first, the internet was really designed as sort of um, a network which was not concentrated, which was supposed to be extremely open, with everyone being able to take part into that network. And the idea that it was really free and easy to enter, and this kind of attitude that was really the philosophy, if you will, behind the internet when it was ignited and spread. But very quickly, what we saw is that the internet as a network was basically getting more and more concentrated, becoming more and more concentrated, because we saw that the key infrastructures when it comes to the internet. So whether it's the servers, whether it's cloud computing, whether it's going to be the physical network itself, which is necessary to have the flow of information going from one place to another, all of that is being concentrated into a very few corporate hands. You have sort of a oligopoly, a few companies running the show, and therefore you have a very impressive corporate power, controlling the internet. And therefore, that could also be the case with AI, because you see the first sign of that. You have just a few companies, a handful of companies, in a race toward AI. And therefore, there is this idea that the winners of that race could have an immense power, economic power, but much, much beyond economic power. Because we might be in an industry, when I'm talking industry, I'm talking about the AI industry, because you have different companies, competing in that new environment, which could be like a winner takes all type of industry. That is, where competition is leading to, a single company or a single survivor, sort of a extreme economic Darwinism, so to speak. Where the competition process is selecting just one survivor. And therefore, there is this risk for sure. I mean, and this is something which certainly is frightening, to some extent. And it's hard to tell at what kind of speed it's going to go, because it seemed like in the West, for example, when you look at the collective West, it's mostly US dominated. There might be some, European actors going forward, but it's nowadays US dominated. The ecosystem is US dominated. When it comes to other nations like China, Russia, for example, they have their own actors, but it's still highly concentrated already. And therefore, the idea is how is it going to be, say, 10 years from now? So in 2025, what about 2035? What's going to be the landscape going forward? And during that period of time, from 2025 to 2035, there's going to be some winners. There's going to be some losers for sure. And therefore, for people, I think the best way to hedge against the risk of losing your skills is to learn new skills with AI, because AI, as I said, is a fantastic tool to upgrade your skills, and also to invest, I guess, in interpersonal skills, because it's also quite likely that people, since people will more and more interact with AI machines, with bots, as we see that already, that in terms of information that you want to have, if you want to interact with your bank or your insurance company, you might more often than not interact with a bot. And I think therefore there's going to be a need for real human interaction. And there's going to be a strong demand for people with those very strong interpersonal skills, because this is something that's going to become, I would say, rare, and therefore quite valued, because people would certainly be in need of that. There's going to be, of course, new types of jobs that will show up. Obviously, there's going to be jobs who will disappear, who will fade away because they are going to be turned obsolete. But also new types of jobs will have to be created, because you would have to manage those AI, tools, those AI dimensions, and therefore it will have to be organized by people, by managers. I think that obviously there's going to be skills and competencies that would be turned obsolete, but new jobs will appear. You would need to have people who would be able to, I would say, articulate the AI tools that we are using in companies. And this is what certainly companies will look for, is to have people who know how to use AI to make their companies more efficient. Because as of now, it's still kind of a murky, blurred situation. We know AI is very powerful. We know some of the tools, but we don't know exactly how to integrate them. For example, with sales, how to integrate them in HR, how to integrate them in operations management. And to be able to do that, you need to have AI managers, people would manage those tools, and would be like the middleman between the technical layer and the managerial layer, because you have to sort of reorganize a company accordingly. Probably AI will lead to quite significant changes from the organization standpoint. That as AI is spreading in companies, you would have to change the organizational structure of the company. You're not going to keep the company in the same structure, because those tools are so powerful that you would have to reorganize things, and therefore you would need people to do that. And so I think the positive side is that new types of jobs will appear. Just like if you look back in 1995 or 2000, I mean, and now you look in 2025, there's so many jobs that we have today that didn't exist in 1995, 2000, and that are very commonplace nowadays.
Do you see higher education institutions moving fast enough to prepare students for these shifts? Or are we still trapped in the outdated models of credentialing human capital?
Yeah, very interesting question because the higher education industry, I mean, universities, business schools, and schools in general are also in this situation. They know they have to use AI, but they have a hard time figuring out how to do it, how to use it. And I don't think they're moving fast enough, but it's difficult because you have also to comply with some standards because the higher education, especially for the higher education and also for the, say, K-12 system, it's a highly regulated industry. That is, you have accreditation bodies specifying, how an academic curriculum should be structured, number of hours, and so on. And therefore, the AI revolution is sort of challenging the existing way of delivering education and structuring programs. And I think education institutions should cooperate with accreditation bodies to redesign the curriculum and to redesign the way education is conceived. Because for example, the relationship between faculty and student. So I think there is always going to be a need to have this in-person relationship between faculty and student. But the faculty will have to do things in a different way in order to be complementary to what AI can bring to students. Because AI, as I said, is a great tool to learn, and therefore it's a great teaching tool as well. And therefore, I think as part of a lecture, for example, it could be interesting to interact with students and to ask them to use AI, to get some data, to get some information, to test some hypothesis, so that you see the way you can use AI as a tool to learn, and not just something that you would use, to not to do your own homework, because that's basically also the fear, is that AI can be used as a way to cheat, and therefore you, instead of writing a paper, you have AI write the paper for you. And therefore, I think what's going to be important is to look at how you defend the document that you have, written with the help of AI. Because nowadays, I think obviously a lot of written documents will be written with AI, or with a AI content, or AI, I would say AI help, so to speak, AI contribution. There's going to be some AI input into a written document, because it's a very powerful, tool. So we have to use it. But the key is going to be when you defend your paper, when you make a presentation, we have to test you to make sure you know your stuff, that you're able to answer questions, that you have understood the nuances of the argument, that you know about the data, that you have a correct reasoning. So definitely it will change the way education is designed, but it's, you cannot go back from that. It doesn't mean that formal education will be entirely different, but it will have to be redesigned in some way. So it would be similar in that there's always going to be, I think, interaction between faculty and students, but the interaction would be, I would say, made different, because AI would be used as a normal procedure of education. Just like you have a whiteboard or blackboard, you would have AI in the classroom, so to speak. And so you would write on the board, you would make a presentation with a screen, but you would also use AI in the classroom, because you need to use it to show how you can integrate AI into your learning process? I think it's important to reflect on the fact that it's a train that's not going to come back, and it's a runaway train, but I think it's not going to be necessarily a disaster because a lot of people are having a massive fear about it. Um, and what we have to look at AI is as far as human capital is concerned. Yes, there is a risk of obsolescence because each time you have an industrial revolution, that is part of the game. Your competence, your skills are at risk of being obsolete. But it's also a great opportunity to upskill and to learn new things very quickly, very efficiently. And I think the interpersonal skills are becoming more and more relevant because in a world which would be structured around AI, in a world where you have automation widespread, the need for human interaction is going to be very, very strong. And therefore, I guess people who have those skills, to interact with other people, to create a sense of belonging, to show leadership, to show empathy, to show kindness, then that's going to be in hot demand. And companies will need to have those kind of people, those kind of managers within their companies. So yeah, I mean, I think it's as we say, it's a mixed bag. But the plus side is definitely there. So I think my fear is more in concentration of power with those kind of tools, because as we said, it's industry which is highly concentrated already. If you look, for example, at cloud computing, if you look at that industry in particular, which is so key to the digitization of companies. If you look at data centers, if you look at AI, it's highly concentrated. And therefore, there is that risk that a few companies, and therefore a few managers will have an amazing power, an immense power that might be regarded as, potentially a threat to society at large. But that's where we should be cautious and where we should have some kind of frameworks, regulatory frameworks, political frameworks to make sure that this concentration of power is not going too far, and because that could be a real issue going forward.
Many talk about AI boosting productivity. But what about the hidden erosion of tactic knowledge, skills that is passed on informally in workplaces? Could AI unintentionally break the chain of human wisdom transfer?
You're putting your finger, you're touching something which is sort of a paradox, because if we look back over the last 20 years about productivity gains in major, most advanced economies, those productivity gains have been quite disappointing in light of the hype which has surrounded the spread of digital solutions within companies, because companies have massively invested in digital solutions, and now they're massively investing in AI solutions. But say from 2005 to 2025, over the last 20 years, there's been massive investments in the US, in Western Europe, everywhere in digital solutions. And you look at the statistics, the productivity statistics, we don't see massive productivity gains. So that is sort of a paradox, because which, by the way, was called the Solow paradox for the 1970s, which was the same kind of phenomenon. The Robert Solow, had this very funny
description, we say that we see computers everywhere, but not in the statistics. That is, the productivity statistics were not great in spite of having computers everywhere in companies and universities. And so we have sort of the same phenomenon. It is massive investments in digital solutions, say from 2005 to 2025, and not really that much of a change in terms of productivity. Of course, there's been productivity gains, but not fantastic. Nothing to do with what we observed in past periods. And therefore, a big question is what's going to happen next, when it comes to productivity with AI, because our companies, as I said, will go for it. They will go for it aggressively. That's what they're going to do. And they hope that it's going to lead to high productivity gains. And we can expect that it's not going to happen so quickly and so smoothly as what they think, because of the, let's say, the challenge that it represents. I mean, you have technologies that are changing very quickly all the time, and you don't know exactly how to use them. You don't know exactly how to integrate those AI solutions within companies. And therefore, you're likely to make mistakes. And when you make big mistakes, you're going to suffer from very small productivity gains, if any. You could even have some productivity losses, because you could disrupt your company. You could, I would say, create a big mess in the company when you do that. And so that is one of the issues, and the expectations by companies, I mean, are very clear. AI is supposed to bring you massive productivity gains, but I think it's going to take a while before companies are able to really master the way to integrate those AI tools within their organization and within their different processes, because that is a kind of management that is brand new. You have to manage people, but you also have to manage the interaction between people, processes, and new types of technologies. And therefore, that's pretty difficult, pretty challenging. And therefore, I expect that productivity gains ultimately will be there, but it will take maybe longer than expected, and it's going to be more disappointing than expected. And we saw in some of the signs of that, because companies are going for it, but they also are a bit disappointed by the impact it's leading. But they have no choice; they have to go for it, because you know that if you sit on the sideline, you run the risk of being, obsolete and driven out of the market. So you have to go for it. But at the same time, you realize it's just not as rosy in terms of productivity gains as expected. So there is going to be, I think, a lot of mistakes being made, lots of waste, lots of trial and error type of things that companies will have to go through, and that, of course, that would be some painful for people, because people would be sort of in disbelief with all of those changes, and when I say people, I mean in companies, they're going to be sometimes taken aback by reversal. We go in one direction and then we see it's not working, so we do something else. And that could lead to lack of morale, in companies, a sense of belonging which goes down, those kind of things. So companies have also to be aware of what they run the risk of losing when they implement those kind of solutions, because it's a risk that you have to consider. If you create a big mess in your company because you're not able to properly integrate AI, then you could, lose your best people, and that's not a pleasant thing to experience.
What about the long-term psychological impact? Will workers lose their identity if human capital is increasingly defined by how well we collaborate with machines?
Yeah, I mean, it's likely to have consequences, because if you look at what happened when machines came along, so to speak, when we started to interact with machines more and more in our daily lives, with equipments which are now part of our environment. I think you can make the argument that we have changed our behavior because of technology. If you look, for example, at the smartphone, when it showed up in 2007 and then became widespread and almost a universal device, then what that led to is the rise of new behavioral patterns. That is, the fact that you have a new technology like the smartphone and all the apps, the app ecosystem, which is going with that tool, then that led to new types of behaviors from people and from companies. So it's likely to be the case for workers when it comes to AI. We have we're certainly going to have to interact. We're going to interact a lot with AI tools, bots, those kind of entities, digital entities, and that's likely to change the way we behave at work and maybe beyond. And so that would lead to changes. Now, what kind of changes? It's hard to tell, but for sure there's going to be some changes. If you look at the smartphone revolution, it's quite amazing the type of changes which took place. People are using their phones more and more in terms of getting information, in terms of booking a hotel or whatever. So it has changed the behavioral patterns in terms of consumption, but also in terms of interaction with others. We communicate a lot more with apps, with text and so on through those kind of devices. So yeah, I think one of the negative consequences, for example, the smartphone revolution, is that even though, and it's sort of a paradox, even though that was a tool and supposedly connecting people with one another, and of course to some extent it is able to do so, but then there is this sort of phenomenon of loneliness and social, I would say misery, which has been spreading as well. So it's sort of a paradox of where you have more and more people being excluded from society, being alone in a way. So loneliness as a phenomenon is more widespread today than it was, say, in the 1920s or in the 1950s. And at the same time, we have a device which is supposed to be a universal, communicator, which has potentially the power to connect you with a lot of others. So it has changed the meaning of connection, meaning of a personal connection with someone else. And therefore, we can certainly have something along those lines with AI. Because if we interact, and we will interact more and more with AI solutions, then that's going to, that could lead us to be more and more isolated from real human communication. And some people would maybe maybe in trouble because of that, because humans were designed to be social, to have at least some interaction with other humans, to have a family, to have like a group, to have some kind of this interaction with others. And if we have a world which is overwhelmingly AI driven, then those instances of human to human interactions would be, would become more and more rare, would have this kind of exceptional quality to them, and that could be a bit depressing, to handle this transition. And because we saw some of that, with the iPhone, the fact that people, because of the internet, in iPhone internet, people are spending more and more time online and less with other people, and that could lead to depression. That could lead to behavior that are, toxic types of behaviors. So we could have this kind of risk, and I think there must be some kind of thinking behind that to make sure it's not going to go too far. That to make sure that we have to, like in schooling, for example, to have those kind of congregation of people to create bonds, to create relationships between people. Because the more you interact with bots and tools, the more you need to have those privileged moments with other persons.
Professor, if you had to redesign the human capital framework for the AI age, what would be the top 3 components? What advice would you give leaders, educators, and even parents to prepare future generations for a world where human capital is not about competing with AI but co-evolving with it?
I think if you think about three elements to redefine human capital with AI. So I think number one would be to use AI as a way to upskill, as a way to acquire new skills, new competence, because it's a fantastic tool to do so. And so we have to, each and one of us, to start using AI to basically have more relevant information and to develop new types of skills. So that's, I think, the first thing. Then to try maybe also to be aware of the kind of skills that are likely not to be, I would say, superseded by AI. So the interpersonal skills, as I said, maybe some kind of communication, empathy, the leadership skills, that would be necessary in a world which would become more technology and AI driven and more complex to navigate. And then I think there is also the let's say the human bonds skills. By that I mean the ability to develop relationships, the ability to develop connections, real connections with other people, because it's critical. For example, what's called a network. And it's part of what called social capital. That is what the people the interaction you have with other people. So AI could be a way also to maybe to interact, to be more efficient into creating, I would say, new business partners, new like-minded, people that would work with you on some projects. So, and similarly to those social media platforms, where basically a social media platform has this massive power of connecting to like-minded people having the same hobbies, the same interests, the same viewpoints, and therefore it's a great way to expand the business this way. Because if you want to I don't know, to launch a channel which is dedicated to, I don't know, animal care, then it's possible to do so, and you may congregate people around that and to have some in real significant impact. And I think it's certainly going to be possible as well with AI. That is, AI is going to be also a tool to organize, to have massive collective ability to organize things, and therefore, for example, to run a company in a different way than it used to be. That is, if you're an entrepreneur, I think it's one of the visions we could have is, say, if you're an entrepreneur in any kind of business, like any kind of industry, you could say, I'm going to start my business by relying on AI tools to be more efficient, to be faster, to be up to date all the time. And the AI tools will be like my employees, so to speak. So I probably will have, of course, some employees, but I will have also those AI employees that would be, my workers, my employees in the company. So entrepreneurship, for example, I think is also to be redefined in the AI age, because I think it's a great opportunity for new entrepreneurs to to set up companies and to be successful by using AI in the very efficient way. And I guess some of the new entrepreneurs, the ones that are probably today creating and setting up companies, in the world, some of the best ideas and the best and most successful entrepreneurs would be the ones who saw, who managed to see through the AI, technology in order to arrange a business model where you use AI as basically your digital employees, and you create a great business out of it.
Thank you for helping us peel away the noise and dive into the deeper truth about AI and human capital. This conversation has really opened up perspectives we rarely hear in the mainstream. To our listeners, this is just the beginning. In upcoming episodes of the Curiosity Exchange, Professor and I will continue exploring how technology, creativity, and education intersect with the human spirit. Stay tuned, subscribe, and most importantly, stay curious.